Thank you all for being here. We're going to pick right up with our study of Job, and we pretty well wrapped up our discussion last week in looking at Job's further response to Bildad in the second round of speeches and responses that Job is given. And now, beginning in chapter 21, verse 1 of Job, we're beginning to look at Job's response to Zophar. Now, you remember that Zophar's approach was his logic, his charge, as we see in chapter 20, verse 4. You see his, really verse 4 and verse 5 both have Zophar's charge and his logic blended together. Surely you know how it has been from of old, ever since man was placed on the earth, that the mirth of the wicked is brief, the joy of the godless lasts but a moment. And that's, what Zophar is saying to Job. Yes, you were blessed, you had all these things, but you were doing evil, and now God has caught up with you, and you're getting your just deserts, Job. Once again, Job is suffering, Job is having problems because of his sin. And really, you can see, as Job replies in chapter 21, you can sense his building anger and frustration at his three companions who have continually accused him of failure. As you look at verses 1 through 3 in IV, Job replied, "Listen carefully to my words, and let this be the consolation you give me. Bear with me while I speak, and after I have spoken, mock on." As Job is responding, he's getting more and more frustrated with his companion's inability to understand where he's coming from and what he's trying to say. Zophar, re-emphasizing this, that you were succeeding in wickedness, but now God has got you and judgment is on you. The proof of all that is that you are suffering. Now, as Job responds to this, however, he's going to go to the heart of a very significant problem of pain that he and we in this room today wrestle. Job says in verse 6 that just thinking about this causes him to tremble. Look at it. He says, verse 4, I'll pick this up. "Is my complaint directed to man? Why should I not be impatient?" Remember, he's been frustrated. "Look at me and be astonished. Clap your hand over your mouth. When I think about this, I am terrified, and trembling seizes my body." And yes, it makes sense. And we looked at this earlier when we looked at the arguments. Yes, it makes sense that, if God is just and if God is holy, and yes, he is, then the wicked should be punished. The wicked should receive what they're supposed to receive. When they sin, when they fail, it just makes sense that God should pay back on time, in our minds. That might be the way it seems like it should be. But look at what Job picks up on, and here's the problem of pain that he really faces, and he's going to work through this. Beginning in verse 7. "Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power?" Okay, Zophar, you said that, the mirth of the wicked is brief, the joy of the godless lasts but a moment. Well then, why do they continue to live on? Why do they get old and they increase in power? They see their children established around them, their offspring before their eyes. Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not upon them. He's going to continue with this. But here's the problem that Job is dealing with in this, and that we run into. And we can just put the little acronym. It's the problem of pain. How can people do terrible things and get away with it? Now, this is a good question to ask France this morning, How can people do terrible things and get away with it? And throughout the rest of this chapter, Job expounds on this. And you'll see it right up here. And from verse 7 through verse 16. We could read all the way through that, but really just look at verse 16. Their prosperity, verse 15. After all they've gotten, they get only good. Job is saying, from my experience of what I see and what I've seen in life, people who are wicked, they only get good. Verse 10, their bulls never fail to breed. Cows, calf, do not miscarry. They send their children like flocks. They dance to the music. They spend their years in prosperity. They go down to the grave in peace. Yet they say to God, leave us alone. We have no desire to know you. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? What would we gain by praying to him? Job says, so far, you're saying that the wicked only are successful for a moment? They only get good. They actually get away with it from verse 17 through verse 21. He says, how often is the lamp of the wicked snuffed out? How often does calamity come upon them? The fate God allots in his anger. How often are they like straw before the wind, like chaff swept away by a gale? They get away with evil. And Job says, going back to, still the same question, how can people get away with it? He's saying, it looks like God, it doesn't really matter to him. Verse 22. Can anyone teach knowledge to God, since he judges even the highest? One man dies in full vigor, completely secure and at ease, his body well nourished, his bones rich with marrow, and another man dies in bitterness of soul, never having enjoyed anything good. Side by side they lay in the dust, or they lie in the dust. Worms cover them both. I know full well what you're thinking. The schemes by which you would wrong me. You say, where now is the great man's house, the tent where wicked men live? Have you never questioned those who travel? Have you never paid no regard to their accounts, that the evil man is spared from the day of calamity? He's delivered from the day of wrath. You say it doesn't look like any of this matters to God. And the great problem with evil, from verse 29 through verse 33, is that the evil man is spared. He's delivered. Who denounces his conduct to his face? Who repays him for what he's done? He's carried to the grave, and watches kept over his tomb. The soil in the valley is sweet to him. All men follow after him. A countless throng goes before him. In other words, Job is saying that out of all of these things, so far, one, primarily, wicked people get good. They get good all their life. We've seen people, that they don't honor God. They don't care for God. And they've lived all their life. And they seem like they, live a pretty good life. Seem like they're getting away with evil. In this world, they're getting away with it. So, does it really matter to God? And the only leveler to it all is when they're dead. And of course, they're dead. Just like we are dead. But we've gone through all of the other. Job said, I got a problem with it. I don't understand how people can do terrible things and get away with it. So far, you're telling me that the mirth of the wicked is only for a moment. I've seen people be evil and wicked to God's face, and they live a whole life and die at peace in their minds. And that's a problem. We wrestle with that. We wrestle with that. We can go back to World War II. If you don't want to look at France today, how can people, Couldn't God have done something about that? What about World War II? We talked about Hitler. 21 attempts on his life. Real attempts. Not counting all the situations. 21 attempts on his life. Never successful. And Hitler used that as part of propaganda that God was on his side. Didn't that matter to God? Killing Jews, steady. God's on my side. Boom, boom, boom. Gas them, burn them. How can people do terrible things and get away with it? Have you ever asked yourself that question?
Well, you just have to have faith, like, that there's a greater good. Like, France this morning, or it's afternoon now, but like today, and it's terrible. And even a college student that was eating last night from California, she got shot. That was on an exchange program. But the thing is, the church
In France?
In France.
I mean, okay, I hadn't heard about it.
Yeah, I didn't either. It was awful. She was just at a restaurant on a study abroad program this semester, and she was killed. And but it just makes it like with me. But then the churches were packed today. The churches are packed. And
Kind of like 9/11 here.
And it is, and you have to go with that. But then you look, and you know, and I tell my kids that all the time, because they're very much on money and boats and things, and I'm like, but, you know, I know this person, and they are not a happy person. But now on the other hand, like the thing with Hitler, I know that God had a greater plan, and I've studied that in college, but you know what? I have yet to ever, I can't say that like in France. And then you do know people, and it's almost like, in quite honestly, like, God, are you kidding me? You know, and I'm like, I did this and this and this, and I don't even want anything big. I just want a break. And yet, this person.
Yeah. I'm not asking to win the Mega Millions. I'm just like, you know.
It's not like I'm one of it saying I want to win the lottery, because like my kids say, you have to play it to win it. You know,
That is a little glitch in there.
And you know, I won't do it because my luck, I'll walk in the gold mine and Matt will come in behind me and I'm buying a lottery ticket, you know. So, but that would happen to
Now you just have to share some of it with him.
That's it. If I buy some honey stuff, it'd be okay. But the thing is, and you really do, even like I know that and I tell my kids that, but it happened this week and I'm like, are you kidding me? This person's doing that and I just want a break, you know, and that's hard.
Yeah.
I feel bad for friends, but it's hard to feel bad for somebody that gives their guns up, and they don't have guns to protect themselves, and then criminals now have guns to shoot them, and they're calling police saying, we need some help, we need somebody down there with a gun, and they're getting shot. Don't give your guns up. I love the Lord, but somebody breaks in my house, he's going to give me the authority to shoot the guy. You shoot him. You protect yourself.
I'll repent later, but I'm going to kill that sucker right off the bat. You know. Yeah. And it is, you know, and we can look at all those individual aspects of that. Yeah, I thought about that too. I thought about exactly that point, that if some of those people, of course, when you have bombs blowing up, there's not much to shoot at. You know.
He got shot. The guy got one of the bombs.
Yeah.
The guy shot him. He said it was the greatest bullet he ever seen.
Yeah, you know. But you know, I wonder about that. But in looking at how is it that people can do terrible things and get away with it? And you know, as I said at the beginning of our study, we're not going to be able to answer all the questions that you're going to have on this in life. But there are some things that help us, and goes back to that idea of faith. Well, you just have to believe and you have to trust. Yes, you do. And there's some things that, you know, we have to consider with that. And one of those things that it's always been of question: do I trust what I see or what I'm told? When we see these things in life, when people do terrible things, what do I trust? What I see or what I'm told? Genesis 2 and 3. Adam and Eve were told, don't eat of the tree. They didn't believe that. They trusted, I'd say, that's supposed to be. Several of you saw that and you went and pointed out. I bet you.
They're back to whispering about it.
Yeah, that's the way y'all would do me. I know.
I was asking her what
Yeah.
she thought about it.
I figured you just trying to read my writing. Then I looked up and I said, oh, wait a minute. I kind of got the wrong word up
My
here.
eyes were getting bad.
Yeah, you
I was
know.
listening to what I was told. You said, see?
There you go. See, that's it. If you trust what you see or what you're told.
Do you trust what you see, say?
Yeah. Because they were told not to eat of the tree. Satan said, look at it. Look at it. If you eat of this tree, you're going to be as smart as God. And what does the passage say? When Eve looked at the tree and saw that it was, she took it, whatever it was. She made that decision. Dumb old Adam just went right along. You know, he wasn't even deceived. He just stupid.
No, he was just married.
Well,
Hey, stop.
they failed because they trusted what they saw versus what they were told. And because of that initial decision, from that point in time throughout life, this world has been slanted toward self-satisfaction. From that initial sin, the infection of that self-serving that's pervasive and pervasive throughout our world. And wickedness is endemic, it's pervasive in everything and in all systems. There isn't an institution in this world that isn't infused with self-serving, which is the essence of the choice to begin with. And, you know, this is what has come out of that sin. And God has, in His mercy, allowed and blessed. That's blessed. Misspelled, but it's blessed. Both good and evil. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 45, that He causes the sun and the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. The whole world benefits from the mercy of God, even if most reject Him. God still supplies mercy. And good or success or bad and failure, hurt and suffering occurs and is part of and is promised in this life. As a result of the curse that God put upon creation, all experience hurt. Passage we've talked about before, Luke chapter 13, where Christ Himself is talking to the Jews who said, you know, when Pilate mingled the blood of some of the Jews in the sacrifice, He said, do you think they were really all that bad? And the tower fell on some other people. Do you think the tower fell on them because they were terrible sinners? He said, no. Listen, all of you need to repent. Those are accidents and evils of life that are a part of what happened there. Bad things don't happen. And we talked about this with the karma and payback and all that the other week. I'm sorry.
I had a seventh grade teacher, and I remember it till the day I die. She said, Carol, life is not fair. Because, we're in school, that's not fair. Carol, life isn't fair. And I thought, how cruel to tell this kid life is not fair. But, from a Christian perspective, we don't really want fair anyway.
No.
Because if you go balancing those scales for any of us, we all fall short. So evil, we all do it. It's just a matter of yours is a whole lot worse than mine.
We want it on our terms. We want it because it made me feel bad. Therefore, you ought to suffer for making me feel bad. But if I made you feel bad, well, you need to understand. I've just had a hard life, you know. And the true situation of the wicked. How can people, going back to that question, how can people do terrible things good way? The true situation of the wicked, and the righteous for that matter, is hidden. Or in other words, it's not obvious. It's not founded nor necessarily displayed in observed or obvious ways. In other words, it's spiritual. When Jesus stood before Pilate, and Pilate asked him the question, "Are you a king?" Part of Jesus' response in John chapter 18, verse 36 was, "My kingdom is not of this world. If so, my servants would fight." The situation of sinners, saints together, is not observable. It's spiritual. It's something that happens inside. And this world is not the end, but it takes faith. All of that, get back to your point of what you said at the beginning. Yes, we've got to believe. We've got to believe in something bigger, something beyond. This world is not the end, but it takes faith in what we have been told in Scripture to see it and have the comfort of God to help us as we follow Christ. Now, the problem with all of that and us is that we have to remember it at the point of and in the middle of all that says life isn't fair and God isn't with me. Everything that was going on with Job said God isn't with you. He lost all of his children in one day, 10 of them. He lost everything he had in one day, the same day. Shortly thereafter, maybe the next day, we don't know, but shortly thereafter, he lost his health. He lost his friends. These were his companions. "Job, you're a bad man." That really helped. He had lost everything around Job was saying, life isn't fair and God isn't with you. And Job had to have the faith to say, "No, I believe what I was told. I'm clinging and I'm going to hold to that. I don't care what it looks like." Now, remembering that, going to somebody in France today, in Paris, and telling them this would probably not go over well with them. But it's the truth. At the point of the pain, is when we've got to be able to go back and remember this in our hearts and minds. And see, no, it doesn't look like we're getting the break. It doesn't look like that wicked, evil people are getting what they deserve. I can't see it, but I believe I'm on the right side. And that's why people say we're crazy as Christians. You believe in pie in the sky and a sweet by and by. Yeah, I do. And I'm going to get my pie. You can't see it here. But like Paul said, I've got a crown awaiting me. And even though everything in life says otherwise, John 18:36 really captures, my kingdom is not of this world. You are not going to create a heaven on earth. It is not going to happen. Heaven is where I am. I'm going to take you to where I am. He said that earlier, remember, chapter 14. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to that place so that you will be where I am. The only time that there will be a heaven on earth is when he comes down to earth with all of us with him after a post-rapture. Yo! See how you can just work that right in? You see what I'm saying? You know.
Y'all wouldn't word it.
See, told you. But that's when heaven gets on earth. But until then, this is what we operate under. And, you know, we've talked about it a lot of times in class. And it almost may sound redundant when I go over it again. But really, you know, when you're hurting,
You already wrapped your hat, so you're not really hurting. It's pre-wrap. Oh, I just told myself that.
they But at the point of pain, at the point of seeing wicked people get away with it, and they have, they are, they will. At that point is when we have to, by faith, remember this. And it will strengthen us. Will it make you feel any better? No. It will still hurt. It'll still feel bad. But it gives you wisdom. And it gives you strength. That arguing and wrestling with all of this without considering these things, just wrestling with that question, will not bring any peace to it. As Paul said to Thessalonians when people talk about people dying, we don't grieve like those who don't have hope. We grieve, but not like people who don't have Christ. It's different.
I think too, because we don't have a real concept, we don't really understand eternity, and this life in the present is what we know. We don't understand it in such a small, minute piece of the whole picture.
Yeah, you hear like, I've heard a lot of guys preaching on having an eternal mindset. You know, you got that mindset on eternity. That makes me think of a guy that I knew that had gotten cancer, and he was a younger guy. And you think a young guy with family having cancer, that would be like the worst, the most awful thing. Because like, that's the best blessing I've ever had in my life. Because without that situation, that what I had to go through, I would probably be walking down the street lost, living down my happy way, you know, walking myself to hell. So you wouldn't think that a young guy with family having cancer would be a blessing, but you know, having that eternal mindset and being able to say, that changed my life, that saved my life. That, you know, that changes your perspective on how you see bad things happen.
We sorrow not as others who have no hope. Yeah. You know. And, you know, it's just that we have to, and we are living in a world where we don't know anymore when something bad is going to happen. Now, it's always been true, but it seems like there's just an atmosphere of danger that just seems to fill and continue to fill our world. And of course, I think it's all related to end time stuff. You know, we've talked about that before when we went through Revelation, and we looked at, you know, those first 3 seals and how that is the circuit of the unregenerate, circuit of life. You have, you know, deception, famine, war, all these things. That's been going on forever, and that's just the cycle of it. It just seems though, and as we get closer to the tribulation itself, it seems that it just is becoming more and more intense. Until that corner is going to finally turn in chapter 8 of Revelation and things get really serious on
Or
earth.
it's more out there in your face now too, every little minor
Yeah.
thing. But the wicked will be dealt with, and the Bible
Sure.
says at the end.
Yeah.
And what they're gonna go through, and what they get by with here on earth is not even compatible,
Yeah.
because they're gonna burn in hell for the rest of their eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm questioning is, well, if you see the wicked get away with it, why are you worried about it? Are you jealous because they're getting away with it? Or what's your mindset on that situation?
A lot of times we are. Well, if I'd have known that I could have got away with it, I believe I'd have done some of that. It's what comes to our minds, although we won't say it out loud. Unless you're in the Sunday school classroom, then we'll say it out loud here. It could very well be a little bit of envy and jealousy that, well, they're getting away with it. I wish I could get away with it. And that says something about us.
And you may could, but then you're gonna put yourself on that other side. The way I look at it, are you gonna join up with evil?
Yeah. And we'll touch on this a little bit later on, because Job will bring this question back up again. And one of the things that it comes out of that discussion is, which is worse? To receive hurt and punishment, pain, cancer, other things that happen in this life now, that, jog your mind and make you think. Or as one guy said one time, he said, every cemetery is a gospel message. Because you're all going to end up there, Is it worse receiving these things, or just skipping happily through life, never having any conviction of wrong until you die and it's too late?
We hired an atheist one time to work. I knew his atheist, we never hired him. We was talking to him one night, and then he seen me pray when I was eating supper. And he said, man, that Bible, he said, it's a great history book. He said, probably the greatest history book there is. I said, you're right. I said, what do you believe happens when we die? He said, you just die, man. You just die. I said, so what you're saying is your best case scenario is my apocalypse, my worst case scenario. I said, I see why you're always so miserable. I said, you have nothing to look forward to after you die, man. I said, your best case is my worst case. I said, have a good night. He didn't last much longer, and I hope I got to him, but you never know.
Yeah,
it's the
but
truth.
you planted a seed.
How do they get through life? They have nothing to look forward to. They have nothing.
Mhm.
I feel sorry for them. I really do.
Yeah, because they don't. They have no hope. And I would much rather have the terrible things happen that awaken my mind and my conscience to where I need to be with God than to just skip through and have no clue that I'm headed off the edge of the precipice. And once I'm off of it and realize I'm off the edge, then I say, oh, and it's totally too late to do anything about it.
I think about those people and, just the things that I've experienced, like cancer and, loss of a job or other personal traumatic things. At least you know that somebody's in control, that God is in control. I might not understand it, or might not like it even, but I know there is God in control. But the people who don't believe, there's nowhere to turn if you're sick or you've had a horrible experience. I cannot imagine living like that.
It's all about being able to take care of yourself to the wicked. It is up to us to be the survivors, which sounds like good old Americanism, doesn't it? It's all about us and how you can pull yourself up and succeed and be successful on your own. You don't even need God, is the logical conclusion of that thought. And that's what we're facing a lot in America today. People don't,
Well, you don't need God, but we talked about this before. The did y'all notice something after this Paris attack? And everybody said it. You don't need God, but something bad happened. And it was okay. Even on Fox, ABC, even Hillary Clinton said, our prayers are with you. So see, you don't until something happens, which is good. But everybody said on ABC News, Hillary Clinton said it, on Fox they said it. They actually said our prayers are with you. And it's just, to me, it's always funny that you can't be religious until, and God has a plan, and I think this is in His bigger plan, but all of a sudden this weekend, God's back in the forefront, because you can say, our prayers are with you. I mean, they didn't say our thoughts, they said our prayers, and they even heard the name God, so it's funny that when a tragedy happens, even on liberal news stations, it's okay to say our God and our thoughts and prayers.
Except there is a certain group of people in America that when they would say our prayers are with you, they're praying to themselves.
Yeah, I don't know if I
Because
would
they think, because man is God. We've talked about, Mr. Kurzweil, who very much considers that man is God. And that when they asked him, do you believe in God? He said, not yet.
I pray.
Yeah. But, he's one of the interesting people that I often think about would be an example, not that he is, but as an example of an antichrist, because he is a Jew, which is interesting. And man is God, and he is brilliant. He is brilliant, and he's working very hard for man to be his own answer to that. But yeah, and I think one of the things about, and here we have our little sinners, here they go, they're headed toward the precipice. And once they go sailing off, part of that falling would be the reverberation in the mind. You could have prayed before you fell off, but you didn't. You could have. Our prayers are with you just echoes to the sinner's mind. Not that they will repent. It will add to the torment of the fall. Just like Jesus said to the rich man when he said, why don't you tell Lazarus to go get a drop of water, put it on. He said, look, Abraham said, look, you went through this life and you had all the good things and Lazarus had all the terrible things. And now it's changed. Remember, he said that, remember, part of hell, for all else that it is, will be in a person's mind, and you can't burn that up either, is the remembrance. I could have avoided this. Now, they'll twist that around and say God is not just, because I was just as good as all those church people. I was better than a lot of them. Yeah, but, we're not talking about a kingdom on earth. We're talking about faith in Christ. Part of that hell will be the remembrance that you could have, but you didn't. And sinners will continue to blame God for it, even there. So, but Job is wrestling with this. And this is like we've talked about. One of the great things about the book of Job is that he gives voice to what we experience and we think and we hurt. I think this is why he's such a great book, is that, he mirrors the voice and the emotions of people, even perhaps you in the class this morning. One of the great things about this book. So as we move on in Job, we move into chapter 22, and this begins the last round of speeches and Job's response. This will take us from chapter 22, verse 1, through chapter 31, verse 40, before it's all said and done. Because Job gives a long soliloquy, beginning in chapter 26, that really goes all the way through chapter 31. And it's interesting, and I won't be able to get into a lot of this, But it's interesting that as we move into this final round of speeches, third round of speeches between Job's companions and him, Zophar doesn't even attempt another verbal battle with Job. He just answered Zophar for the second time. Zophar doesn't even try again the third time around. And why, can be just anybody's guess. He may simply given up on Job, trying to convince him of Job's guilt, and saw him as a hopeless case. So he decided, well, I ain't talking to you no more, But either way, whatever reason for his not commenting, we're left with Eliphaz and Bildad. And as we look at this third round of speeches, they both take an approach that at first tries to look beyond the situation that Job is in, which would be, a good thing. This is really what they needed. All of them needed to do is look beyond the situation. Except even as they tried to look beyond it, they twisted it back to their original premise of Job being guilty. And most of this section is really a record of Job's words in response and in a lot of confusion. Really, Bildad's final speech isn't but 6 verses long in chapter 25. Most of this whole section is what Job has to say. But we'll at least get started by looking at what Eliphaz says in his third round. And it's interesting that he opens not with an accusation, which is what he had done in the previous 2 speeches that he gave. But he takes a different tack. And instead of taking Job to task for saying he is righteous, Eliphaz, in effect, says in these first couple of verses, why would God care if you were righteous, Job? God is so high and so far away that he really isn't concerned with your puny goodness. Look at what he says. Verse 2 of chapter 22. Can a man be of benefit to God? Can even a wise man benefit him? What pleasure would it give the Almighty if you were righteous? What would he gain if your ways were blameless? His question, what pleasure would it give, is really a pretty good question. For, in actuality, being good and righteous is the bare minimum of God's expectations of us. As we've said before, if you are going to work to get to heaven by your good works, let me find a place in all of this brilliant handwriting that I have up here.
But Billy, that's how he got in the trouble he's in now. He was good.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Say it again.
That's how he got into trouble, because he was so good.
Yeah. Because Satan said, let me get my hands on him. If he's so good, I'll have him cuss you to your face. And the Lord said, go ahead. Of all the things I would really rather the Lord not do is say to Satan about Billy, go ahead. Really? Can you not say this? Or you can do everything but take his life. Thanks. I'm glad to feel I'm loved,
That's a blessing, though. That's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, yeah.
It really is.
But it's also an opportunity to say, what is going to happen to me? God's turned the devil loose on me. And he did.
I'll let you have all the growth.
Yeah. I'll pass on this thing,
Debbie wants
No, quite honestly, from the start, that bothers me. The start of this chapter bothers me. This is not my favorite.
Just trading places, yeah.
The only, and it's so interesting that if we didn't have chapter 1 and 2, we would agree with those 3 companions of Job. Because, we'd say, hey, you ain't that good. Great.
It's some deep, dark secrets, man.
Yeah, yeah, there's something wrong with you somewhere, something wrong with you. If we didn't have chapter 1 and 2 where God said, you know, have you considered my servant Job? There ain't nobody like him. He fears God, he eschews evil. In other words, he reverences me and lives like it. And Satan said, you hedged him in, let me get my hands on him. God said, okay, go ahead. And that's the part that bothers you. God said, go ahead.
It was too quick.
God can't make a snap decision, you know.
It's really like Trading Places. You know that movie with the dollar, Brad said? It was just
Eddie
too
Murphy movie.
quick. It was
Yeah, I've not seen the movie, I'm sorry.
But you know,
They bet $1 on a guy's life.
and that
Same
was,
deal.
it was quick, and that was it. And Job was so good, but the thing is, you know that Job did have such an eternal view. He had to have like the most eternal view in the history of the Bible to
And he was a Gentile living before the day of Abraham. I mean, that also is something that blows us away. He wasn't even a Jew, for crying out loud. He was a Gentile that lived before the law. The only thing he had to go on was what had been handed down from Adam. In
Just oral?
just evident oral messages. Perhaps there were things written, we don't know,
I
but
think it'd be tablets or something.
yeah, there probably was, but we have no record of those. The only thing we have is, you know, the book of Genesis, you know, Exodus, Deuteronomy, you know, the first 5 books that Moses wrote, who probably wrote the book of Job as well. But Job lived back when, you know, it was the oral message given to Adam that was handed down. And for him to have that level of faith then, and we struggle with all that we have as Christians to have anywhere near that today. It's, you know.
Well, that's why Job's
Amazing.
so hard. It's like you look at David, and not that we've done the exact things, but we can identify with David, you know, on the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
Job is like, you know,
Yeah, when Job's high, he's high. When he's up there, his faith is, you know, he's looking way beyond what we're even looking at now. And then he just falls right back down to the valley again. That roller coaster that he's on. And as Eliphaz says, you know, what good is your righteousness to God? And I got to leave it at that. It's about 20 hours. They're going to ring that bell and those over here and maybe blow a horn.